All right, time for some barbecue. We're gonna order pizza. All right, so here's my rusty little smoker. As you can tell, I've been taking really good care of this thing over the years. It's one of those cheap smokers that I got from Academy. It cost me like, I think, $100 at the time. I've done a lot of chicken and ribs and some really mediocre brisket on this thing, so I think finally the firebox has given out, so it's probably time to do something else with it. Not really sure what yet though. But as you can see, it's pretty rusty. I'll go ahead and show you the inside of the chamber. This is where I've done some modifications. I've added some metal in there, some tuning plates, and some baffles. Just try to get it to become a better smoker. I also added this charcoal basket, which at this point in time is just one big tetanus shot waiting to happen. So we'll throw that on the grass. Also got this little stand that I use to keep the charcoal basket off the bottom of the firebox. And then an additional piece of metal here that I use to just keep the charcoals away from the box. As you can see, the box is already rusted out, so this thing is on its way out. It's probably more rust than metal at this point in time, so I'm going to try to figure out what to do with this thing. I think I'll just have, at first I was thinking of trying to remake the firebox, but figured that wasn't worth it. And I'm going to go ahead and try to come up with a new project for this thing. Not really sure what to do with it yet, but I'm going to try to figure something out. First things first, I've got to clean it up because it is dirty, as you can see. All right, time to clean this up. Alright, so I went ahead and cleaned it up as best as I could, and then used the shop vac to vacuum out all the, I guess, ash and garbage. When I was doing that, you can see the firebox has a bunch more holes, so one there, one there, one there, like 3 little ones right here, and then another one here. There's probably more if I were to clean this up, but since I don't really care about this part, I'm just gonna leave it as is. Next step to get this firebox off is I've got to loosen all these nuts. I've already started doing that, and these bolts and nuts are so old that they're kind of getting stuck in the wrenches. So this is going to be an interesting thing to try to figure out. So we'll continue doing that. I'm going to pull all these nuts off, and then after that, hopefully these bolts will slide out and the firebox will come off. Hopefully. Alright, so we got the firebox off, and I was actually expecting to see a lot more rust than that. Here's the side. This is where I put that high temperature silicone sealant to try to help with the smoke loss, but obviously there's some rust here. Not as terrible as I thought it was going to be, but we'll need to clean this up, and I'm going to go ahead and take off the gasket next, because this is pretty old and kind of worn. As you see, it's coming off in some areas, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull that off. As you see, all the bolts in there are pretty rusty and old. I'm not going to try to reuse those. Alright, as you can see, the main chamber is looking pretty clean. Had to use a combination of obviously the putty scraper and the wire wheel. So took a long time to clean it off. There was a lot of creosote in here that the putty knife took off initially, and then for everything else, the wire wheel took care of the rest. Mostly I used it on the outside, especially on the door where there was a ton of creosote. There's still some left here, but I'll get that later. What I really used the wire wheel for was to take off the fire seal. The glue on that stuff is really strong. I don't know who makes it, but basically it just wouldn't come off. I tried using the putty scraper and it just took off the top layer. So a couple minutes with the wire wheel and it took it mostly all off. I guess I can get the residual pieces with probably some acetone later on, but for right now, as you can see, this is the chamber. Everything is looking about as clean as I want to get it for right now, while I try to figure out what to do with this main chamber. So I was thinking of wiping down the interior with some acetone, but I figured that, you know, I'll leave it as is right now. Whatever residual oil is in there will help keep the metal protected and keep it from rusting out in the meantime. So I'm going to go ahead and try to clean up the area now and then figure out what to do with this next. Alright. Okay, so by now I'd come up with a brilliant plan that I was going to turn this old offset into a pseudo-ugly drum smoker, which I totally blame on me going to the hardware store and seeing one of those pit barrel cookers and thinking to myself I could build one of these things in a few hours, no problem. So first things first, I decided to take off the lid with a cutting disc and some pliers to make it easier to work with going forward. I didn't want the lid flopping around while I was working on this thing and possibly pinching my hand in the process. So I'm just using the pliers here to take off what's remaining of the lid. Alright, so this is the additional strip of metal that I bent on a roller wheel to add to the main chamber. This would give me enough clearance to cut a new lid on the top when I turn the chamber on its side. So all I'm doing right here is just tack welding it in place, and then I'd go back and weld it completely and then grind it down to finish it up. So I'm using a strip of metal bent into a semicircle as a guide for the plasma cutter. The idea here is that I would lop off the side and that would give me a new lid. As you see, the plasma cutter is making really short work of this job. It's going through this metal like it's nothing. At this point I have a new lid, and I'm already having dreams of making ribs on this smoker. Ribs. At least that's what I thought. So at this point I'm drilling holes to use as plug wells for a strip of metal that I was going to mount on the inside of the chamber. The idea here is that it would serve as a lip for the lid to sit on. This is about the point where everything just started going really wrong. Okay, so as you can see, this idea went horribly wrong. Basically, whenever I cut off the top piece and tried to fit it back together, basically the cylinder got kind of out of round, and so this cap never fit on properly. You had to kind of shove it on, and it kind of defeats the purpose of having a lid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go at this with a different approach. I've already gone back and started welding this back up. So I put the cap back on and I'm back at square one. So I've got to figure out what to do next. And I think I've got some ideas, but I've got to go ahead and test them first. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and finish up welding on this, get this back to square one, and then we'll take it from there.